BMW Sauber tester Sebastian Vettel has walked into a race seat at Toro Rosso.
And there's a lot to learn, a lot of new situations. You know, you can feel the car feels completely different.
At the 11th hour, Honda's former F1 technical director Ross Brawn took ownership of the team, creating Brawn GP.
Jenson Button's a winner again. Brawn GP are winners on their first race appearance, and not only that, it's a 1-2 finish. Button from Barrichello. The smiles are on Ross Brawn. What a result!
Attack there, surely.
Oh yes, there is. There goes Kubica, there goes Vettel. That's the last thing they needed to do. Vettel's lost his front wing, and Jenson Button will be romping clear now. That's the last thing they needed.
We are world champions! World champions!
2009 is a year that will live on in Formula 1 history because of the amazing story of Brawn GP. In the midst of a certain global recession, Honda decided that it wasn't worthwhile to keep a Formula 1 team running. So on March 6, 2009, the team was sold to Ross Brawn, their former technical director who was once an integral part in Ferrari's success in the early 2000s, for only £1. This was done so that Honda could avoid the hefty cost of shutting the whole operation down, which in turn saved the jobs of over 700 employees. But that's not even the craziest part. Brawn went on to win both the Constructors and Drivers' Championships that same season. It was a combination of inheriting the genius car design that came from Honda, who was originally going to race it in the 2009 season, and both their drivers stepping up, with Jenson Button winning 6 of the first 7 races of the season on his way to becoming the champion, and Rubens Barrichello, who was the perfect second option who occasionally won races and stood on the podium for Brawn. Their story will continue to be told in Formula 1 folklore, but one chapter will be the focus for this video. You see, despite Brawn's success early on in the season, a limited budget resulted in other teams being able to catch up and make a push for both titles. Red Bull emerged as Brawn's biggest rival, who after the Turkish Grand Prix was much more competitive compared to earlier on in the season. It was their drivers who took the fight to Jenson Button for the championship title. Australian driver Mark Webber, who finished 4th, was behind Button by over 25.5 points, and second place was Sebastian Vettel, our main character for the story. The Weltmeister needs no introduction. A legend of Formula 1 history with over 4 titles, 53 wins, 102 podiums, and until it was broken by Max Verstappen in 2023, was the record holder for the most consecutive wins in Formula 1 history, winning 9 races in a row in 2013. Most of his success was with Red Bull, but he was also a serial winner in Ferrari before he became a living meme and kickstarted the Aston Martin team in their first 2 seasons in Formula 1 before retiring in 2022. He's my favorite driver, and I think a lot of other people can say the same. But personally, I haven't seen a lot of people talk about his 2009 season. It was a year where he had his first real chance at the championship. So how did he get there? What happened that led him to finishing in second place? And how did this affect his future seasons? Well, we'll have to go back to the year 2007. It was the year that Steve Jobs released the first iPhone, where LeBron was dragging his bomb Cavs team to the finals, and when Robert Kubica suffered what was one of the scariest crashes in Formula 1 history. He couldn't make the next race in America, so Sauber called up their reserve driver Sebastian Vettel. He had already made some appearances in practice sessions before, but this was going to be his first ever race in Formula 1. He immediately showed promise. A Q3 lap that was enough for P7, and a P8 finish later in the race that was enough for 1 point made him the youngest ever point scorer at the time. This earned him a move to Red Bull's sister team Toro Rosso, a team that was used to test out Red Bull juniors to see if they were ready for the senior team. Vettel was determined to do so. Later on in that season in the Chinese Grand Prix, he managed to finish in 4th place after starting all the way back in 17th. And just a year later in the 2008 season, in the harsh conditions of the Italian Grand Prix, Vettel had managed to take a miraculous pole position in the rain and went on and secured the win the next day. He became the youngest driver to win a Grand Prix at the time, and he was beginning to convince a lot of people that he was the next great driver. Red Bull thought so too. And at the end of the 2008 season, he was promoted to the senior team, being partnered with Mark Webber. This was Vettel's chance, a young driver and a young team, looking to make a name for themselves in the Formula 1 world. We were now into the 2009 season. Going into the year, people weren't so high on Red Bull. They finished 7th in the previous season, finishing with only 29 points and a lone podium from David Coulthard. But people recognized Vettel's potential and how this could affect their upcoming season. Vettel's debut came in the Australian Grand Prix. Vettel had qualified 3rd for his Red Bull debut. He stayed close to the front, running in 2nd place by lap 6, but a crash on lap 18 forced the race restart. Button held the lead over Vettel, and lap by lap he had extended the lead, and by lap 56, as Vettel made a mistake into turn 1, it allowed Kubica to make a move on the outside, but Vettel's front wing clipped Kubica, and as a result, both cars went off-road and had damaged aero. Just a few turns later though, Vettel would have bigger problems than no front wing, as now he had no front left tire. This resulted in a safety car finish, with Button winning and his teammate Barrichello in second. The new kids on the block had converted a 1-2 qualifying finish into a 1-2 race finish. On the other hand, Vettel left Australia without a single point. It was a disappointing finish, but he had shown that he and Red Bull can fight at the front. The next race in Malaysia was hammered by torrential conditions. Vettel qualified third, but because of his collision in Kubica in the previous round, he was awarded with a 10th place grid penalty. He had managed to get all the way up to 8th, but had spun out on lap 31, retiring then and there. I guess the signs were always there for Vettel. Things would be on the up next race though, as Vettel finally took home his first haul of points and first win for the Red Bull team in the Chinese Grand Prix. It was a great result for the whole team, as Webber finished in second, and Red Bull had moved from 5th to 2nd place in the constructors' standings. Now you'd think that this would be the start of a run of form for Vettel, but no. Button won the next 4 races in a row, winning in Bahrain, Spain, Monaco, and Turkey. And Barrichello finished second twice out of those 4 occasions. Brawn dominated wherever they went, but both Vettel and Webber kept Red Bull in the fight. Vettel finished second in Bahrain, and Webber secured a podium in Barcelona, with Vettel right behind him. In Monaco, where Vettel spun off and hit the barriers in turn 1, Webber salvaged some points for the team in P5, but they would both finish on the podium in the next race in Turkey. Button held a dominant championship lead, as he was 26 points ahead of his teammate Barrichello and over 32 points ahead of Vettel. But the British Grand Prix was a turning point. Red Bull introduced a massive upgrade package that significantly improved the car's performance. A redesigned rear diffuser aimed to combat Brawn's innovative double diffuser design, and it worked. Vettel dominated in Silverstone, qualifying in pole position over 4/10 faster than second place Barrichello. Vettel set multiple fastest laps in the race and led over 57 of the 60 laps of the race to take home the win. With Webber in second place and the nearest Brawn car being over 41 seconds behind Vettel, it was a message. Brawn's limited budget didn't allow an upgrade package to scale of Red Bull's, so it was clear that the tides were about to shift in the championship fight. The next race in Hungary was overshadowed by a scary incident, with a stray spring coming off of Barrichello's car hitting Massa in the head and knocking him unconscious. He missed the remainder of the 2009 season. Vettel qualified second behind Fernando Alonso, but a lap 1 incident with Raikkonen affected his car to the point where he'd retire mid-race. This was beginning to be a pattern for Vettel. Surely this wouldn't be that big of an issue in the future. After the summer break, the season resumed in Valencia. By this point, Red Bull had whittled down the lead that Brawn had in the Constructors' Championship down to 15.5 points, a lead that was once up to over 36.5. Vettel would only manage a 4th place finish in qualifying, 1 behind Barrichello in 3rd. It was a massive opportunity for Vettel in the Drivers' Championship, as it was an off race for Button, who after qualifying 5th had a poor start and fell all the way down to 9th. But in the race, Vettel failed to capitalize, but to be fair, it was an issue with his car this time around. The Red Bull had struggled across the whole weekend with hot temperatures. Vettel's engine blew in practice, and in the race, he retired on lap 24. Barrichello would take his first win of the season, but championship leader Button only managed to finish in P7. It was still a good weekend for Brawn though, as since both Vettel and Webber failed to score any points, their championship lead was up to 27.5. In the next race at Spa, it was Force India who took all the headlines, as veteran Fisichella took his Force India to a shock pole position. He lost out to Kimi Räikkönen in the race, but he still finished in 2nd place. Great result. It was another off race for Button, as he was knocked out in Q2 and collided with Roman Grosjean on lap 1, which caused him to retire. Granted, it was obviously Grosjean's fault, and it was the only race of the season where Button didn't finish in the points. Vettel capitalized this time, finishing on the podium and jumping back up to 3rd after he had moved down after retiring in Valencia. Brawn returned to their dominant form in Monza, however, where Barrichello led the team to a 1-2 finish, with Button finishing in 2nd. It was their 4th 1-2 finish of the season, and a reminder of the dominant team that we saw earlier on in the season. It was an uneventful race for Vettel. Returning to the track where he won the year before, he could only qualify 9th and finish 8th. Taking home a single point. Vettel was now over 26 points behind Button, but Vettel kept his championship hopes alive in Singapore because he qualified on the front row behind Lewis Hamilton. Vettel was in contention for the lead of the race, but he had to serve a drive-through penalty, which resulted in a P4 finish, just outside the podium. It was a missed opportunity seeing as Button finished behind him in 5th. Meanwhile, a brake failure for Webber led him to spinning out and crashing his car, which eliminated his chance of winning the title. Vettel was still in it though, especially after the Japanese Grand Prix. It was a dominant display from Vettel, as he led qualifying in each session and led every single lap of the race on his way to a win. He was denied a Grand Slam, funnily enough from his own teammate Mark Webber. Surely, this will be the worst thing that'll happen between them. Going into the penultimate race in Brazil, Button and Brawn had the chance to seal both championships. Button was 14 points ahead of his teammate in 2nd and 16 points ahead of Vettel in 3rd. He just needed to score 4 points in Brazil and he could seal the championship then and there. The same can be said for Brawn, as they were ahead of Red Bull by 35.5 points. Even if Red Bull finished the last 2 races finishing 1st and 2nd, all Brawn needed to do this race was score 3 points to deny Red Bull by half a point. It's safe to say they did just that. Despite a win from Webber, a 5th place finish from Button was enough to seal both the Constructors' title and the Drivers' title, as Button scored exactly 4 points to deny both Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel the title. A win for Vettel in the inaugural Abu Dhabi Grand Prix didn't matter. Brawn GP were world champions, and Jenson Button took home the Drivers' World Championship. Button finished with 95 points, 11 points ahead of Vettel's 84. This loss crushed Vettel. In an interview in 2018, after losing the title to Lewis Hamilton in Mexico, he said that out of the 3 times he had failed to win a title, 2009 was the worst. I have been there 3 times now in a position like that, with 17, 09, and this year. Probably 09 was the worst one, the lowest point. It's understandable that Vettel would choose 2009. It was his first real championship, and he had failed largely due to his own mistakes. And that was a large part why Vettel lost out in 2009. It was due to his own mistakes. Examples include his collision with Kubica in Australia, his spin in Malaysia, his crash in Monaco, and his collision with Raikkonen in Hungary. All driver errors that easily could have been avoided that resulted in points finishes that would have rectified Button's 11-point lead, or at the very least made the championship fight much closer. Apart from Malaysia, where he wasn't even running in the points, Vettel could have scored some points in these races. He was running 3rd in Australia, which would have given him 6 points. Vettel qualified 4th in Monaco and moved up to 3rd before crashing out, which was another potential 6 points lost. And in Hungary, while we don't know his true pace as his collision with Raikkonen was on the first lap, he qualified 2nd, and if he hadn't got a slow start off the line, he would have been running near the front. Another important factor was just how reliable Brawn was. Out of all the races, Brawn only had 1 mechanical retirement all season, which was Barrichello in the British Grand Prix, whereas Red Bull had 5. Vettel retired twice due to a mechanical issue, once in Valencia due to an engine issue, and once in Hungary due to a suspension issue caused by the collision with Raikkonen. A big part of this was due to their engines. Brawn made the switch to Mercedes engines, which was huge for their reliability, whereas the Red Bull Renault engines, even in their heyday in the V8 era, were still unreliable, even in future championship seasons across 2010 to 2013, just as Christian Horner, and he'll tell you all about the toxic relationship between him and Renault in this period, although maybe don't DM him about it though. Another reason could be as simple as down to consistency. Button was a much more experienced driver compared to Vettel and finished all but one of the races of the 2009 season in the points. Button's average finishing position was 3.36, while Vettel's was 3.64. Even in races where Button was off the pace, his teammate Barrichello was able to take points away from Vettel. So it was inexperience, unreliability, and inconsistency that led Vettel to lose out in 2009. So how did this affect him afterwards? Well, he rallied back to win in 2010, taking home his first ever championship and becoming the youngest ever driver to win a championship. He doubled down in 2011 in dominant fashion, and he won his 3rd title in 2012 by only 3 points. And lastly, he made it 4 in a row in dominant fashion in 2013 again, so not much I guess. It definitely gave him some experience in how to challenge for a title, and it definitely taught him that each race matters in a championship fight, especially in 2012. But even then, in his most dominant years, he was still prone to lapses in judgment and the occasional spin, which was even more amplified in his later years with Ferrari. So the one last question that I have is that if he had won his first title in 2009 and still won the next 4 across from 2010 to 2013, how would his legacy change? Well, he'd equal Fangio, but not Schumacher for the most titles in Formula 1 history. He definitely moves up a bit in all-time rankings, but again, not enough to outmatch the likes of Hamilton or Schumacher or even Alonso. I'd argue that his legacy doesn't change that much. Yes, he'd have an extra title, but most of the criticism that Vettel has stems from the fact that after Red Bull, Vettel didn't amount to the same level of success. He'd still fumble the championship in 2017 and 2018, and he would still have those terrible years in Ferrari in both 2019 and 2020. But his peak across those 5 years would be solidified in the top 3 behind Hamilton in the 2010s and Schumacher in the 2000s. His 4-year stretch already puts him in such a high ranking. Imagine if he had won 5 in a row. But we're only left to speculate. Sebastian Vettel is still one of the greatest drivers in Formula 1 history, and while he's had his lows, nothing changes the fact that he's a multiple-time champion, a serial race winner, one of the most dominant drivers in history, and most of all, a great human being.
We have to remember these days. There's no guarantee that they will last forever. Enjoy them as long as they last. I love you guys.